On a busy New York afternoon, amidst the hustle and bustle, a quiet act of kindness went unnoticed. Keanu Reeves, the beloved actor, became a silent benefactor to a stranger in need on a cold day. Though a simple gesture, this moment of generosity would leave a lasting impact and change the life of the man forever. New York City, with its crowded streets and people constantly rushing by, is a whirlwind of activity. Amidst the hustle and bustle, it's easy to overlook the struggles of those around us, especially the homeless. In this busy urban landscape, individuals often go unnoticed, their stories hidden beneath the noise of daily life as the city carries on with its relentless pace. The street corner at the intersection of 5th Avenue and 42 N Street was alive with the frantic pace of the city. Yellow cabs honked impatiently, pedestrians darted between them, and the cold wind bit sharply at exposed skin. Among the sea of hurried faces, a lone figure sat at the edge of the sidewalk. The man, his weathered face framed by a scruffy beard, huddled under a thin, tattered blanket that barely shielded him from the biting chill. His cardboard sign, scribbled in black marker, read simply, "Please help, anything helps." Yet, it was just another anonymous plea, lost in the blur of passing feet. Most people walked by, heads down, eyes averted, too busy, too preoccupied to see the man sitting just a few feet away. A few glanced at him with brief, uncomfortable pity, then quickly turned their gaze elsewhere, eager to avoid confrontation with the raw truth of his existence. He shivered, pulling the blanket tighter around his shoulders. His shoes, mismatched and worn through, offered little protection against the cold pavement. He sat with a weary patience, making the best of his situation. Every so often, he'd glance up, hopeful, as someone approached, but they would pass by without a word, without a second look. In the city of millions, it was easy to become invisible, and for him, today felt no different. Yet, despite the indifference around him, he remained seated, hoping for a break, for kindness, for change. Keanu Reeves walked down the busy street, blending seamlessly into the crowd of New Yorkers rushing through their daily routines. It was a regular afternoon. No cameras, no flashing lights, just the rhythm of city life. He wasn't wearing the signature sunglasses or a Hollywood smile, just a man out for a stroll, lost in his own thoughts when something caught his eye. Near the corner, amidst the blur of hurried footsteps, he saw the homeless man. His thin, ragged blanket barely protected him from the cold, and his cardboard sign, faded and weathered, seemed invisible to most who passed. Keanu paused, slowing his stride. Unlike everyone else around him, who either avoided eye contact or simply didn't notice, he took a moment to see the man. There were no dramatic gestures, no fanfare. Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out a few $100 bills, placing them gently in the man's hand. Their eyes met for a brief second, no words exchanged, just a quiet acknowledgement of a shared moment. Keanu turned and continued on his way, as inconspicuous as he had come, blending once again into the pulse of the city. The transaction wasn't about fame or recognition. It was simply about one human being seeing another in need and offering help in the most humble, unassuming way possible. For the homeless man, it was a moment that would forever stay with him, a small act of kindness in a world often too busy to notice. The homeless man sat frozen for a moment, staring at the money now resting in his hand. At first, he couldn't quite process what had just happened. People walked by every day, tossing him a few coins, maybe a crumpled dollar, but this was different. Keanu Reeves hadn't just given him money. He had looked at him, really looked, and offered something far more profound: respect. The man's hands trembled slightly as he held the bills, his mind racing. How could anyone be so kind, so unaffected by the world around them? This wasn't just charity, this was a genuine human connection. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words felt too heavy. He simply murmured, "Thank you," his voice quiet and humble. Keanu, without a word, smiled softly, the kind of smile that said everything and nothing at all. He gave a slight nod, acknowledging the man's dignity, and then, just as quietly as he had appeared, turned and walked away. No drama, no spectacle. He didn't linger for praise or a conversation. He simply disappeared back into the crowd, blending seamlessly into the anonymity of the city. As the homeless man watched him leave, something shifted inside him. It wasn't just the money, it was the way Keanu had treated him, like he mattered, like he was a person, not just a shadow on the street. For the first time in a long while, he felt seen. And that feeling, that moment, would stay with him long after the city had moved on. The homeless man sat quietly for a while, still clutching the bills in his hands. It wasn't just the money that made him feel different. It was the quiet dignity of the moment. That small, unspoken exchange had rekindled something in him he hadn't realized he had lost: hope. With the money, he was able to buy a warm meal that day, something simple but deeply satisfying. The cold, empty pit in his stomach finally filled, but it wasn't just food that nourished him. It was the reminder that kindness existed in the world, even for people like him. The next morning, he used the rest of the money to buy a pair of new clothes, something that made him feel a little more human again, a little less invisible. For the first time in a long while, he stood in front of a mirror and saw a person, not just a homeless man. Keanu might never know how deeply his small act of kindness had affected him, but the ripple it caused was undeniable. That single gesture had given the man more than just a temporary respite, it had reignited a flicker of belief in his own worth. It planted a seed of possibility, a reminder that change, however small, was always within reach. He didn't know if he would ever cross paths with Keanu again, but it didn't matter. The memory of that quiet, compassionate moment would stay with him, nudging him forward, one step at a time, toward rebuilding his life. Keanu Reeves could have easily walked past, like everyone else, too absorbed in his own world. But he didn't. In a city where anonymity reigns, he chose to pause, to truly see the homeless man. No grand speeches, no cameras, just a quiet act of kindness. It wasn't about recognition or drama. It was about acknowledging another human being's dignity. The gesture was simple, yet profound, showing that the most powerful acts of kindness often leave no trace except the change they create in someone's life. Keanu's quiet empathy reminded us that we all have the power to make a difference. Even the smallest gestures, unspoken and unseen, can ripple through a person's life, shifting their world in ways we might never fully understand.